I'd like to call this meeting of the High Point City Council to order. Before we begin tonight, I will call the roll, but I'll let everybody know first who is here present in City Hall. Looks like we have everyone on the council present except for Councilwoman Monica Peters, who I believe is joining us remotely. Monica, are you with us remotely?
Yes, I am, Mayor Wagner.
Okay, so we have all 9 either physically present at City Hall or present remotely. We'll now begin the meeting. I'll ask everyone to please rise for a moment of silent prayer, followed by a pledge of allegiance to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. First item on the agenda is our strategic plan update. Is there?
I got it.
Or you got it?
I do. This is Councilman Williams. I'll just read off some of the statistics over the last few months. The staff recorded 14 zoning complaints. A total of 49 public nuisance cases were abated, 16 by the city and 33 were owner abated. Due to the pandemic, the LCE staff did not work on a Saturday during the month. There are 2 housing cases with an ordinance passed for demolition waiting for repairs to be completed. This is 337 Wingo and 216 Underhill. There are 4 housing cases with approved demolition ordinance about to be bidded. During the report period, there were 455 total active cases, 242 active minimum housing cases, 82 active public nuisance cases, and 131 active zoning cases. And from this point, I will turn it over to staff. Lori.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Is this okay? So tonight, I'm trying to recap. I don't usually do this, so it's going to take me a second longer than what we normally do. I'm kind of recapping in 2020 some changes that we put in place for many reasons, and I'll recap those as I go through. But the previous processes that were set up for local codes when we went to Acela were too cumbersome. The inspectors were doing duplicate work. They did some things in the field, and they had to come in the office and do some of those same tasks. So we took some steps to make changes. So in 2020 and around February, but this started back in the fall or fall of 2019, Mark Schroeder in Development Services, who is our go-to person with Acela. He knows everything, and he understands kind of what we needed, and then he can translate to Redmark, who's the vendor, on what we need. So we started working on these changes, and from all of this hard work, we have greatly improved our process as well as some data collection that we're able to do some of the reporting you've asked, and then hopefully down the road some more. If you ask about it later, we'll be able to capture. And we're continuing to do this, and our next step, the steps that we did here were for the public nuisance cases and the zoning cases, but our next step is to work with minimum housing in those processes. So in February of 2020, we established some districts for the inspectors. Previously, they would crisscross across the city. Sometimes they'd cross each other on the same street. It was just, like I said, it was just cumbersome. So we established districts, and that was based on previous cases. And I was also having to manually assign these. So the admin support person would give them to me, and then I had to manually assign them to each individual inspector. So that took time from me as well. And this also allows the inspectors to be proactive in their areas because they're held accountable for that area. So if I go through an area, you go through an area, or a citizen, and they see something, then, if it's something especially obvious, the inspector could have and should have noticed that and respond to that issue. And then we also have, this is going to help with fuel cost as well. So then in March of 2020, we got iPhones for the inspectors. They already had some iPads. So we can use an app in the field. So this allows them to do real-time updates. They take pictures in the field and I can see it immediately in the office. So they post a sign and then somebody calls me and they're upset and they want to know why they got it. I can see immediately why without even having to call the inspector. And that was set up for public nuisance. That also schedules the inspections so that the system, once they result in inspection, it will automatically during certain steps schedule it out so we don't lose cases. It moves the case to the next step. So again, the inspector doesn't have to come in and go to the office to click other buttons. And efficient data collection. And the same thing for zoning. Somebody calls, I can immediately see the pictures that were posted on the record and answer questions to you all or to a citizen. And this is the districts that we came up with. And this was pulled from previous cases, public nuisance cases and housing cases. And it looks kind of funny. Some areas are bigger than others, of course, but they really basically have the same amount of cases. They're just different types of cases. And this can be altered depending on moving forward. So like maybe next year, we'll look at the data from 2020 to see where the cases were and where the inspectors need to be and alter that accordingly. The public nuisance cases, also I'll be talking about inspections and cases. So inspections make up a case, so there'll be more inspections than there are cases. And this slide compares the 2019 public nuisance inspections to the 2020 inspections. So we went from 4,047 in 2019 to over 6,000 in 2020. So it was an increase of 50% during a pandemic. And then this slide compares the 2019 to 2020 zoning. So we increased about a little over 50% from 1,586 to 2,448 inspections there.
Pardon me, Lori, do you mind going back to the slide just for a moment, please?
The public nuisance?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have a question?
Yeah, there's not any idea why in some of these, well, I mean, I was going to anticipate the summer months, I guess, you see that big increase. I mean, when you all look at this, is there any, what are the conversations you have to kind of make sense out of it?
Well, in January and February, we were just implementing, January, February, March is when we were just implementing all this and the changes. And so, again, like you said, with summer, so March, April, May, June, July, August, September are our summer months. So we get more complaints, but again, with being more proactive in that area. And I'm guessing that the May is really weird. I don't understand how it's almost identical. But
A lot of it.
it's maybe with the pandemic, I don't know if it's people weren't complaining as much and we're being more proactive. We'll know better next year when we're not in such an odd time to compare maybe, but I'm just attributing it to being in the area, so the inspectors are more proactive, and summertime.
Summertime means grass is growing faster.
Yeah.
A lot of grass.
And surprisingly, people didn't mow their grass because they said it was a pandemic. They weren't supposed to mow their grass. I said, no, that's not how it works.
That was an option.
My son tried that with me too.
I did. Yeah, so we got the same call. So any other questions on public nuisance or zoning? And then the fuel cost in 2019, we're spending a little over $6,000. And then it decreased. Again, I think hopefully some of that's due to the areas. They're not crisscrossing back and forth across town so much. And then, of course, we were split up. We have some inspectors every other day, they're working from home, and then some are working in the office. So literally 50%. Every other day is not working. Any questions on fuel?
Are you going to be continuing that practice?
Until HR tells us because the inspectors share an office.
Right.
They don't have cubicles. Everything is open.
Right.
So that's the best way because they still do have office work they have to do. Otherwise, we have 6 people sitting within like 2 feet of each other. So until HR
Would you be more
changes.
productive being on site than working from home? Is it a cost savings to have people alternate to go home
Well, the cost of fuel, obviously, but as far as they've done, I think the numbers show they've done pretty good. Some better than others, of course, just as anything does when you're working from home. Some people step up and some people slack off, so that's just part of what I have to deal with. And then housing cases, our complaints decreased from 2019 to 2020, from 223 to 117 cases. I'm attributing this probably partly to pandemic. You know, people didn't want people coming in their houses for quite a bit. We're pretty much back. If you look at the numbers that Chris has read in, we're receiving more complaints now as compared to the first and middle of the year. But then also with the moratorium and people not being evicted, we would get a lot of complaints from people when they were being evicted because they may not want to have complained while they were living there because they were scared they'd be evicted. And then when it actually starts, they may call and tell us about problems that are happening, and then we go out. So that's what I'm contributing to that number drop to. Okay, so the cases that we found in violation, we went from 2019, that's one step ahead of us. So the public nuisance cases increased from 2019 to 2020 with a 43% increase. And being proactive, the changes implemented, we went from 29% proactive inspections in 2019 to 62% proactive inspections in 2020. So that I think is attributed to the areas again, and putting an inspector in an area that they're accountable for helps as well. So with the number of cases that we did in 2020 and that we had to correct, of the inspectors, when they first went out, we found 18% of the cases, which is 473 out of the total, that were not in violation. Sometimes we get a complaint on a Thursday or Friday. By the time we get out there on Monday, somebody's already mowed it. So that may be that issue where some people are get excited and think something should be a violation and it may not be. Of the ones issued notices of violation, 55 were still active when this data was collected. I started getting this data the 1st of January. So out of the cases, 655, the city did have to abate, and 1,418 were owner abated.
Laura, have we seen, has that number, is there a way we can kind of maybe just get an idea of what that number looks like when it comes to complaints closed, owner closed? That looks a whole lot better than what I remember back from probably somewhere in the ballpark of about 2016, 17.
So you want to compare it back that far?
Well, just the last year or so, just curious if that we're seeing more owners stepping up.
I think we are seeing a few more owners abating, and we can run that number. Also, I'm going to try and implement something this year that we started last year, the end of the fiscal year, is giving the owners an extra week. I don't know why, but that extra week, somehow they feel that it gives them something. So they may not get it done on the 15th when they're supposed to, or 16th or 17th, but they may have it done by the 20th or 21st. Okay. But I can compare some of those numbers to previous years.
Thank you.
Lori, if you don't mind me asking, where the city corrects, typically there's some sort of lien or fine or something, I think, placed on it for that. And this may be getting too much in the weeds, but do we have a pretty high success rate of collecting the funds from that? We keep up with that because if it's not paid, we put a lien on the property and it goes on the tax bill. We can run those numbers for you. I know we've done it. I'm not sure exactly. We have the numbers. It may be broken down slightly different than what you're asking for, but I can get those. I can talk to Mark Schroeder and he can probably get them for you. Thank you.
And of the zoning cases increased from 435 to 518 in 2020. And that's a 19% increase. In the inspector initiated cases went from 37% of the total cases to 58% in 2020. So again, that's 21% increase just to the areas, and hopefully inspectors just being more proactive in that area and knowing what's expected. And my last slide is just talking about, I told you last year and then this year, our the public nuisance violation. We have identified 100 properties that fall under the definition of a chronic violator. And for 2021, and these are properties that received a notice in 3 times or more in 2020 and still have the same property owner now. And they are sent a notice and it tells them that if they're found in violation in 2021, we just clean the property immediately. We don't give them another notice and continue to give them time. And we found 100 this year for the 2020 when we ran the numbers. Last year, we only had 27. So that's definitely increased. So just real quick, I know it's a lot of numbers and everything, but to summarize, establishing the districts, we think, and reconfiguring the SELA, we've increased our efficiency and having more cases and inspections, less fuel cost, and we hope it'll continue through the next year. Does anybody have any questions?
I've got a couple. This is Councilman Moore. You just mentioned the 100 chronic owner cases. Could you report back how many of those are locally owned?
Locally, sure.
And then the other thing that crossed my mind, how many inspectors do we have out right now, or have working right now, I should say?
We have 6 inspectors that work in the field.
6 inspectors are working 455 cases in January.
If that, I don't have those numbers in front of me. Is that the active?
Yeah.
Yes, the active total. Yes, that's how many we're working.
Thanks.
On that same vein, this is Councilman Jefferson. To the chronic violators, I get the stipulation that they've been notified at least 3 times. What I'd be curious about, is there any differentiation between those who have been notified and have corrected and those who have been notified and have not been corrected?
There is no distinction in general statute. It just says if they have been notified 3 times in a previous calendar year of any public nuisance violation, they fall under the chronic violator.
So essentially, they could be someone who all 3 times that you called them, they corrected it. But now that they officially fall under this chronic violator, they now get placed into the one where you send the notice one time and then you immediately go and do, even though in the past they've corrected. Do we have any discretion on that we can utilize as a and I'm asking probably with a dual thought in mind. One thought is, for the sake of the resident, whatever bill they incur. But the other thing is looking at us, and again, getting in the weeds on costs. But if we are automatically going out and doing work and putting liens on stuff, taking city staff time and manpower to go and do stuff on a property where the owner has done stuff, I'm not justifying the reason why they get the nuisances called, but they're correcting, but they still fall into chronic violator, and we automatically go and correct for them, even though they have a history of correcting. They just unfortunately also have a history of doing before they correct. So it's just wondering if we had that discretion to say, well, this person has corrected, all they need is that second phone call and they will correct.
We can sort through the 100 that we have and find out how many did it all on their own, and then maybe the percentages, how many they did on their own and how many the city had to clean. I think and I believe we could probably tweak it. Is Joanne or Megan on the phone? That I think we could tweak it for our city a little more. That if we wanted to say that we only send it to those where the owners didn't clean it, then they come off the violator list and then the others would get a regular notice. I think the intent behind it is because it costs us about $7 every time we send a notice to somebody to mow their grass. So it's almost like they use us as their property management to tell them when they need to clean. Is what I tell people when they call me is you need to check on your own property. It's not the taxpayer's duty to tell you when you need to mow or not mow. So I check.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Lori, it's Joanne. I was just going to agree with that statement. And yeah, if we wanted to tweak it, we could.
But I will run those numbers and let you know how many out of the 100 were breakdown of owner cleaned them all, partially cleaned, or what? Is that what you want to know? Do you think that would help? you?
Well, and I don't know if it's necessary for you all to have to go back and do all that extra work. I think my question was around, are we exploring that opportunity to use our own discretion where it may be in our benefit and the mutual benefit of a resident to not go out and do something if they've course corrected in the past. But I get what you're saying when we sort of condition them to get us where we're calling them and we become their like monthly reminders of something. Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's what a lot do. They just rely on us to tell them, and then they'll go out and clean it. So we may send them, 3 or 4 notices in a year, and they only clean it 3 or 4 times when it probably needed it more like 5 or 6 times.
Yeah. No, I don't need any more information, but it sounds like based on what Madam Attorney said, there is some wiggle room for discretion. I just trust you guys will continue to assess that as necessary.
We'll go back and look at that and see if that's an option, or if we think that would be feasible. If it's 1 or 2 out of 100, it probably, we can discuss it with Mike and see if we want to do it that way or not. I understand what your thought on that is.
Yeah, I'm sorry, this is Councilman Williams. The long and short of it is, it's a deterrence to absentee or, landlords or property owners. And trust me, for the one notice they sent, I've got 10, 11 phone calls or emails or asked us to do so. It's just something to kind of rein that in. And it's been successful. When did you implement this?
I believe last year was our first year doing it.
Yeah, it's been a lot less. I'm kind of surprised with the pandemic and all that. I don't get as many as I did in the past, but yeah.
And to clarify, you mentioned legislation. That wasn't a local bill. That was a statewide.
That's general statute, yes. So we could change it locally. We couldn't. I think we can't be more restrictive, but we could
be more
lenient.
Okay, thank you so much.
Any other questions?
Excuse me, it's Joanne again. Actually, we can't be more lenient.
We can't be more lenient. We could be more
Right, it's the opposite. That's
okay.
Do it. At the very least, we have to do what the statute provides.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
That's all I have, Mayor.
Okay. Mr. Holmes, would you like to maybe give us a little update on the marketing committee?
I would, Mr. Mayor, thank you. We resumed meeting after the holidays earlier this past week. We had a presentation from Market Authority's firm that is supporting their campaign. And so we just kind of talked about what the next steps were, looking at pulling together all the data, incorporating the surveys that Eric sent out to the city to capture the voice of the customers, of the citizens of the city. And then in March, we're going to plan a strategic retreat for the marketing and branding task force to actually begin to formulate our next steps for release of our campaign, citywide campaign. So some of that will involve some targeted focus groups from amongst the community. But we're finally getting to the point of actually putting forward a product in terms of our strategic goal for getting out a campaign for the city.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone have anything else to add to the strategic plan update? Okay. Next on the agenda is the public comment period. Obviously the city's council is not meeting with our meetings open to the public. So, but you still are allowed to submit public comments really at any time. If you would like to submit a comment, you can do that by calling the city at 336-883-3522 and leaving a message, or by emailing your written comments to publiccomment@highpointnc.gov, or you can drop off written comments to the City of High Point utility payment drop boxes on both sides of the City Hall here at 211 South Hamilton Street. During the past period, we did receive two public comments. One was from Glenn Chavis and another from a Reverend Simmons. These are in our Granicus program if you want to see them. So with that, then let's see. Next on the agenda are the Finance Committee items. And for that, I will turn the meeting over to Councilman or Mayor Pro Tem Brett Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Wagner. On tonight's finance agenda, we have only 3 items. They were mainly contract type things for utility poles and technology for our upcoming new police department and a contract for repairs at our east side wastewater treatment plant. All 3 items were discussed and approved at finance, and I am presenting this consent agenda with a favorable recommendation.
Okay. Motion has been made for approval of the consent agenda items. Is there a second?
Second, Holmes.
Seconded by Councilman Hudson. Is there any comments or questions? Okay, hearing none. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Moore?
Aye.
Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
Councilman Jefferson?
Aye.
The mayor votes aye, so that item is approved by a vote of 9-0.
And that's all for finance.
All right. Moving right along. Next, then we have, there are no prosperity and livability items. So next we'll move to the Community Development Committee items. And for that, we will go to Councilman Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. The first item up is 2021-38 ordinance demolition of dwelling 1336 Cox Avenue. And for that, I will turn it over to staff. Lori?
Good evening again, Mayor, City Council. The first case we have tonight is 1336 Cox Avenue. The inspector observed this property unsecured while they were on another inspection. I don't think this is. This is the wrong. It's the wrong presentation. Is that yours, Art?
If you're listening in, we are just working through some tech issues.
No worries. It's part of what we're all dealing with, right? We're all human.
Okay. I sent 2. I emailed one and the other was from one link. I have it. Can I give it to you? Or you want to postpone this and how do you want to do this? 'Cause it's gonna be-
You do it off of this. Is it 1336 Cox, Chris?
Mm-hmm. 1330s.
Will this help you? You want to use this?
I can go through it. I mean,
Okay, well, if, whatever, if you want to use this, you can
but I
use it.
assumed I needed the pictures up there to,
They've got them.
Yeah.
I don't
We can
know.
all
Yeah,
see them.
we've got them.
y'all can see?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My st- Okay, then I'll just go ahead and y'all follow along. So we originally inspected this on, I'm going to put this down, on January 3rd of 2019, held the hearing on February 5th of 2019. The owner did appear for the hearing. Mr. Ungo stated that he was going to check into having the fire department to burn the house down for training. He didn't want to pay taxes on the house. He purchased it just for the land. We issued an order to repair or demolish on February 5th with a compliance date of March 8th of 2019, and we have not heard anything else from him. The house, of course, is still standing. He is not delinquent in property taxes or anything.
Okay. I will ask in that case, Madam Clerk, did we receive any information or a request for or against this order?
We have not.
Thank you. In that case, I will go ahead and make the motion to approve item, give me a second to get back there, computer shut down. 2021-38 ordinance demolition of dwelling 1336 Cox Avenue.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for approval of this item. I believe that was Councilman Hudson.
Mhm.
The second. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Moore? Aye. Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
Councilman Jefferson?
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye. So that item is approved by a vote of 9-0.
All right. Next up is item 2021-39 ordinance demolition of dwelling 1220 Lakeview Heights Drive. And I'll again turn it over to staff.
Where do you want me to put it up? Oh, can you put the presentation up? I'm sorry, I didn't know that's what you were saying. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, this is, so this is just a map of the property, and just so you know, it is in ETJ as well.
That's the first one.
That's your
Sorry.
1336.
That's the one we just voted on.
Yes, yes, I'm just
Oh, okay.
rolling through it so
Gotcha.
everyone else can enjoy.
Gotcha.
Okay. So now the next, okay. Did you say next, Chris? Are you ready?
Yeah.
So 1220 Lakeview Heights, we originally inspected on July 16th of 2019, and this is also in the ETJ. This is a little different. We inspected it. It's just a large shed outbuilding that they put on the property. We held a hearing on August 16th of 2019. The owner did appear for the hearing, and Mr. Patrone stated that he had reached out to the company that installed the metal accessory building and was looking for them to repair the structure. We issued an order to repair demolish on August 19th of 2019 with a compliance date of September 19th of 2019. I think the inspector said this happened, the roof caved in because of snow. And it appears that the building was added sometime between 2014 and 2018 without obtaining any building permits. There's not a primary structure on this lot. Therefore, an accessory building typically is not going to be approved on that. So they wouldn't have been able to build it. So, and the current owner purchased it in June of 2017. So if he chooses to try and do something, let's say he wants to repair it, he'll have to come in and not only get a building permit to repair it, he would have had to have gotten permission from zoning and planning as well.
All right. Any questions for staff? All right. For the record, Madam Clerk, have we received anything for or against this item?
We have not.
In that case, I move to approve item 2021-39 ordinance demolition of dwelling 1220 Lakeview Heights Drive.
There's a motion that's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Holmes. Any discussion? Hearing none. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Moore?
Aye.
Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
Councilman Jefferson?
Aye.
The mayor votes aye. Item is approved by a vote of 9-0.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. The final item for tonight is 2021-47 agreement of Core City, CDC winding up agreement and city acceptance of property transfer. And for that, I'll turn it over to Greg.
Greg Ferguson, Assistant City Manager. These two items are related. You have in front of you a Core City CDC winding up agreement that has some relevant dates in February and March. We're on track to hit those key dates. The winding up agreement calls for the Core City CDC to transfer 17 properties to the city. And that process is underway. I'll be happy to take any questions. The properties are outlined in the attachment, and there are 3 that are part of the small scale manufacturing initiative. And then 1 was just simply a residential property. The action-
We're taking a walk during the meeting.
the
Got
action,
it on my phone.
the action requested is to approve the Core City CDC winding up agreement, accept the land transfers back to the city, and to authorize the appropriate official
Mr. Creed?
agreement and deed.
Apologize. Go ahead, continue, Greg.
With that, I'll answer any questions.
Is there any questions of staff from the council?
No.
Thank you, Greg. So do we need to, we can just kind of vote on this as one, right? Or do we need to?
My understanding is it can be as one, to approve and to accept.
Okay,
So approve the agreement and accept the properties coming back to the city.
okay. All right, so in that case, I will move to approve and accept item 2021-47 of the Core City CDC winding up agreement, which includes the city acceptance of the transfer of property.
There's a motion for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll go with Councilman Holmes, I believe. Johnson. Okay. I'm going to be really happy when we get rid of these partitions. Okay, there is a motion and a second for approval of this item. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Moore? Aye. Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
Councilman Jefferson?
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye. So that item is approved by a vote of 9-0. Next on the agenda are several public hearing items. The first 2 are just establishing public hearing dates for 2 annexation cases. The first one is to establish a public hearing date of February 15th, 2021 for annexation of 28.2 acres on the north side of West Wendover Avenue. Property is addressed as 4912 and 5000 West Wendover Avenue, Guilford County tax parcel 154,731 and 154,740. And I move for approval of that item. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Williams. Any discussion? Hearing none. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Moore? Aye. Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
Councilman Jefferson?
Aye.
Mayor votes aye. Item is approved by a vote of 9-0. Second is another resolution of intent to establish a public hearing date, February 15th, 2021. This is a voluntary contiguous annexation of 9.5 acres on the southeast corner of Gallimore Dairy Road and South Chimney Rock Road. It is addressed as 775 and 771 South Chimney Rock Road, Guilford County tax parcels 153,576 and 153,577. I move for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Hudson. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Moore? Aye. Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
Councilman Jefferson?
Aye.
And mayor votes aye. Item is approved by a vote of 9-0. Next item is a annexation request of James Martin and Shirley Martin.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Case, annexation case 20-08. And I will turn the meeting over to Herb Shannon.
Thank you. Herb Shannon, Senior Planner with the Planning and Development Department. This is a request for voluntary contiguous annexation for approximately 4.2 acres at the eastern terminus of East Springfield Road. This is located in the southeastern portion of the city's planning area. You see that area highlighted in red on the map. That is the property in question. Here's a larger scale map. It's located just south of Allen J. Elementary School. The applicant is requesting annexation to have access to city utilities. They're proposing to build a single-family dwelling on this land. This property is within the city's ETJ area, the extraterritorial area where the city has zoning and control. So there's already a zone R5 district, and there is no rezoning associated. The current zoning will serve the purposes that they're proposing for the site. This annexation petition represents a logical progression of the city's annexation policy. As you can see, it is right adjacent to the city limits. For the members of the public watching, the land area highlighted in white are parcels that are already within the High Point city limits. Areas in gray are unincorporated areas of Guilford County. This is right next to the city limits. There's an adjacent residential neighborhood. So city service vehicles are already present in this area, and this annexation petition will not negatively impact the city's ability to provide services. Regarding this case, staff is recommending that after you deliberate on this case that you close the public hearing. For any annexation petition, 2 key items are needed. You need an annexation ordinance, which includes a written legal description, and staff prepares that. The applicant surveyor gives us that legal description. That's part of your package. You also need an annexation map, and that is prepared by a surveyor for the applicant. We need that at the date of the public hearing. The applicant's surveyor has not had an opportunity to finalize that map. They're working on it now. So staff, and those documents are recorded at the Register of Deeds office and also forwarded to the North Carolina Secretary of State, so it's an accurate account of the city's corporate limits. So since that map has not been presented, staff have recommended that you address any questions you may have for staff or the applicant. Once all your questions are addressed, that you close the public hearing, don't continue it, and that you note for the public record that you will take final action on Monday, November 15th. That will still allow time for the public to comment if there are any comments, and provide time for the applicant surveyor to get that annexation map in for staff to review and make sure it's correct. So at this time, are there any questions of staff on this annexation petition?
This is for a single home?
They've noted that they are looking to do a single home, but it could be multiple homes. The main thing that staff was evaluating based upon an annexation policy, is this an appropriate extension of the city limits? Are we jumping out too far? Well, this is right next to the city limits, and all city services are available.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, thank you, Ms. Shannon. Madam Clerk, have we received any comments on this item?
We have not.
Okay. So as
I think the applicant is available if you have any questions.
Oh, okay. All right. Is the applicant here or online?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Would you like to say anything? Or if not, I'll just ask if anyone at council has any questions for the applicant to go ahead and do that. But you do.
Open for questions.
Okay. Anyone on council have questions for the applicant? Okay. Doesn't sound like we do.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much for attending the meeting.
All right. Thank you.
All right. So this item then will remain, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing, and this item will remain open then, and it'll be, we're not going to continue it. We're going to hold it open, and we're going to vote on it on February 15th, correct?
Yes.
All right. All right. So this will stay on our agenda, and we will bring it back up in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Mayor Wagner, and the applicants. This is in my ward, and so I'm sure it will all work out just perfectly.
It doesn't seem to be too complex of a problem. All right. Next on the agenda, we have the general business items. First one is grant of an easement, 911 West Burton Road.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's Joanne Carl, your city attorney. Council is being requested tonight to approve a dedication of a 15-foot easement on the property which is owned by the city. Is located at 911 West Burton Road. This dedication of easement would go to Clifford and Tina Denny. It is for access and a water line for the Denny's. Currently, the Denny's actually own an adjacent property at 951 West Burton. Throughout history, the Denny's and the prior owners of the property located at 951 There's no legal record of them having legal access, although they've been accessing across the city's property. So they actually went to Davidson County, the Denny's did, requesting a water supply for agricultural purposes from Davidson County. And the county is requiring a proper easement of record for the connection. So in granting this easement tonight, if you so choose, it will put something on record legally for everybody that they can reference from now on.
Any questions, for staff?
So this is Councilman Moore. We're granting the easement and Davidson's supplying the water.
That's correct.
Sounds like this is just getting something on record.
Yeah.
It really is. And it's something that the county is requiring before they will allow the water connection.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions, comments? Okay, if not, I'm going to go ahead and move for approval of this item. Is there a second?
Second.
Mayor Pro Tem. Anyone have any questions? Okay. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Moore?
Aye.
Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
Councilman Jefferson? The mayor votes aye. Item's approved by a vote of 9-0. Next is we're allowed to vote on this now. This was the item that was on our previous agenda. This was to correct some typos in the city charter with reference to our 4-year terms.
Yes,
Madam Attorney, we're allowed to vote on this now?
you actually are. This is like the third step, the third time that this has come before council. It is all required by statute as far as the process goes. It boils down to two very simple numerals, the numeral 2 being changed to the numeral 4 in 2 areas of your charter so that it will be consistent representing the 4-year terms that are currently in place. After tonight, you can go ahead and vote on the ordinance. We're requesting that you adopt that change tonight. And then the clerk will publish a notice stating that the ordinance has been adopted and summarizing the contents.
With that, I'll go ahead and then make a motion for approval. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilman Hudson. Any comments? Okay. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Moore?
Aye.
Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
Councilman Jefferson?
Aye.
Mayor votes aye. Item's approved by a vote of 9-0. Next, we're going to have a briefing on the Human Relations 2021 January through June work plan. For that, I'd like to recognize Jelani Biggs and also take this time to congratulate him on his promotion with the city.
Both of them. Thank you.
Mhm.
Both of them.
And also John Hollis, who's standing beside him.
Thank you.
Who also received a recent promotion. Congratulations to both you gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. Well, the mayor kind of stole my thunder a little bit, but we'll move on.
What are you gonna do?
Watch out when you give
Mr. Mayor.
politician a microphone.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, as you know, with our 6-month work plan that we have from the Human Relations Commission, we typically do the presentation. This is a little bit of a complex presentation in that the person that helped us formulate the work plan has now accepted a new position, Mr. Biggs, as the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for the city. He's going to continue until we're able to backfill his vacant position. He'll continue to give us support in the human relations capacity. Just a word about that diversity, equity, and inclusion position. That's going to be a position where we're really looking at ways to maximize our participation, whether it's hiring, promotion, different items that most cities have an issue with continuing to stay relevant and stay current. We now, at your request and through the work with the manager's office, we now have that position in place. And we're happy to have Jelani doing that. But we're also happy to have him presenting this Human Relations Commission work plan. And with no further ado, I present Jelani Biggs.
Thank you, Jerron. Mayor, City Council, good evening. What you should have before you is the 2021 Human Relations Work Plan. There are 3 items that I'm going to briefly summarize this evening, and of course, entertain any questions you may have about it. First is the Fair Housing Committee. Some of the commissioners felt it was important that we dive a little deeper into fair housing enforcement, education, and outreach. The Fair Housing Committee would be tasked with, in this first 6 months, just exploring what that would be, specifically in the area of a fair housing assistance program. So a fair housing assistance program, otherwise known as a FAP, is an extension of HUD, a local extension of HUD to enforce fair housing rights right here in the city. As you may know, I came from the city of Winston-Salem, where I was a fair housing investigator, trainer, and mediator. So what the commission is hoping to do is to research that process. It is a multi-phase process, and the city would need to assess the feasibility of going in that direction. There is an interim certification period to any FAP agency that lasts approximately 3 years. HUD is assessing it, if you want to do it and if they want to enter into that agreement with you, one of the first steps that the council would need to consider if they were to choose to take that direction is enacting a fair housing ordinance. So that's the first step to becoming what they call substantially equivalent in HUD's eyes, and then moving on to some of the more logistical things that you would have to put in place. Second, you'll see a conflict resolution training. Again, as you can imagine, COVID restrictions have greatly impacted the way that the commission operates in this season. Many of our programs that we've done historically and that we would be looking to implement involve gathering in person. And so what we're going to use this first 6 months to do is really plan for when we don't have those restrictions and we can begin to gather. This idea was actually borrowed from Charlotte. They offer conflict resolution training. One of the tweaks staff decided to kind of put on that is that let's assess the feasibility of it, leverage our current referral resources that we have, and use some of our community partners to do that. One thing with all these items, you got to look at the free time that commissioners have and their availability to implement any of these actions. So with conflict resolution, we will be partnering with agencies in the community and leveraging their expertise in the field and increasing our referrals in that area. And lastly, the Homework Hangout program. This is home for me. I actually borrowed this idea from my church, Hope Community Church, where we actually take church members over to a housing community in Winston-Salem and meet with students on a periodic basis. The anchoring function here is to meet with them to do homework. The unique thing as the city that we would bring to this is to engage with first responders, public safety, as well as human relations commissioners. I thought it would be a good way to create a positive engagement with police and law enforcement, develop relationships with youth. I can tell you from personal experience, we tend to target elementary and middle. Beyond that, I can't do the math. So that's a strong area to start in, but I also think it's a strong age group to tap into at an early age and develop those relationships. If any of the council members have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Jelani Biggs.
I'm sorry.
Councilman Holmes, congratulations.
Thank you.
Could you expand a little bit on the conflict resolution training? What is the hope for outcome in this training? What does it add to the ability of the Human Relations Commission?
Sure, that's a good question. One of the things that we were working on in our retreat is tackling that very question. It initially started as a train the trainer program, where we thought maybe it's best to assess our ability to do that, giving commissioners other commitments. One thing that this can be used for, we mentioned earlier, the commission's potential role in a FAP agency. There's a conciliation process as a part of any fair housing investigation, one in which commissioners under a hearing board may be a part of. So this training may help them in a conciliation process where parties have to come to an agreement, but we would be assessing in this first 6 months if this is a strong item to move forward with.
Mr. Biggs, this is Councilman Jefferson. I want to say congratulations as well on your role as DEI officer, and thank you for being willing to support human relations in your capacity until we get that position filled in the future. And obviously, Director Hollis, now Managing Director, congratulations to you as well. Well deserved for both of you guys. I got to say that this is awesome. When I turn around and I read our city's mission that says creating the single most livable, safe, and prosperous community in America, it is my opinion that this sort of strategic plan fully encapsulates and quite frankly helps us get a little bit closer to that. When you start talking about fair housing, you know, I recall just several months ago when there was a resident, I won't say the name, but in Ward 1 who reached out, who needed some support because she felt that she was on the wrong side of a bad deal. And in many cases, I'm just gonna be honest, it pained me a little bit that our hands were tied with what we could do. We had to refer her to Raleigh. And for a woman with limited resources, with children, without transportation, in the middle of a pandemic, to have to rely on someone in Raleigh to give her any sort of reprieve or restitution, I can't imagine being in her shoes. And so us at least taking the opportunity to consider the feasibility of this and where there's a demand for this, I can appreciate it a whole lot. And it helps us move forward as we continue to be the single most livable. It can't be livable if folks have their living in jeopardy and feeling like there's no restitution when they're wronged. And so at least having that in place helps us also think, obviously looking at conflict resolution and where the conciliation process down the road, if that helps our commissioners become more apt there, and also where there's potential opportunities that continue to go there. And then also the homework help. I think they really build on the safe and prosperous components to our mission a whole lot. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the work of the commission, grateful for the work of you all. And also I want to shout out my peer, Councilman Johnson, since I know that he has been very much involved in those meetings and in those conversations in many ways. I don't know if I'm giving you too much credit, but were you the brainchild of some of this stuff, Tyrone? Huh? What? All right. I all did it together. I won't go too far. But no, seriously, shout out to all of you all. And I look forward to us receiving sort of more information and news and updates on this as this goes about, and supporting where possible sort of further steps.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Anyone else?
Just thank you for the work. I knew where you were before you went into your planning stage and to where you all eventually landed on. This is awesome. Really good work.
And I do want to thank you, Councilmember Williams, for attending that meeting. You really launched us into the retreat. So thank you for that.
Yes. Well, I'll entertain a motion for regarding this item.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Councilman Hudson, seconded by Councilman Williams. Is there any other debate or comments? Hearing none. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Councilman Moore? Aye. Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
Councilman Jefferson?
Aye.
Mayor votes aye. So that item is approved by a vote of 9-0. Next on the agenda, we have some minutes to be approved.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion to approve by Councilman Williams, seconded by the Mayor Pro Tem. Any debate on the minutes? Any corrections? Okay, hearing none. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters? Councilwoman Peters?
Aye. Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Moore? Aye. Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
Councilman Jefferson?
Aye.
Okay, and the mayor votes aye, so that item is approved by a vote of 9-0. There will be no need for a recess meeting on Wednesday of this week because we don't have any public hearing items to vote on. So if you show up on Wednesday, there's liable to not be anybody here. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion to adjourn by Mayor Pro Tem, seconded by Councilman Johnson. Is there anyone opposed to adjourning?
not opposed, but I do want to shout out while it's February 1st, it's the start of Black History Month. Our city is notable for its own Black history. February 11th is just about 10 days away where the first high school sit-in took place. About 15 miles or so up the road, the first sit-in across the country took place on February 1. So it is a notable day and very grateful that we get to, as a country, celebrate those kinds of things. And just a big shout out. I don't know if you all have seen, I know we're getting emails for some of those tours at the Children's Museum and Arena and Plant 7 and Condon Yards. It's so awesome that even in the midst of a pandemic, our development kept going. And what I'm hearing from young professionals, out-of-towners, diverse populations, older folks, from everyone who you could possibly think of, is that they are amazed at the progress with which our city is moving to address things on an at-large front. So I'm incredibly proud of us, very grateful to have such a powerhouse staff. I think you guys rock. Seriously.
Excellent. Anyone else like to speak?
Just really quick, I would say to our colleagues, if any of you haven't gone on a tour of the Condon Yards or the Children's Museum, please do so. At least for 3 of the older birds up on council, the 2 of our earlier strategic plans was young professionals retention and the Catalyst Project and the Cogden. If you ever get a chance to go in that building, you actually see the manifestation of some of the work we put in there. So just want
Were you including me in that older group? Yes.
our experienced members of council.
Okay, is there anything else? All right, this meeting is adjourned.